Hello everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. Cousin adheres to McDonald's employees' rules. This is a story about my younger cousin, whom I'll call Ellie, female 15 at the time, for the sake of privacy. My extended family and I went to McDonald's at our nearest mall. McDonald's has this phone app where you can use coupons to get extra fries or save a little money. One of the rules for the app is that you can only use one coupon per phone. Ellie knew this and prepared to make two separate transactions. She was trying to order food for her and her little sister, Anna. Again, not a real name. Anna gave Ellie her phone so that when Ellie ordered for her, she could use her coupon. Ellie walks up to the register with two phones in hand, hers and Anna's. And the minute Ellie walked up, the employee scowled. Ellie starts ordering for herself and scans her coupon from her own phone. She finishes her transaction and begins to start ordering for her sister. The employee immediately says, "No, only one coupon per person." And Ellie says, "Yes, I'm ordering for someone else." The employee again scowling, yelling, "No, you have two phones, you can't do that." Ellie gestures to Anna saying, "I'm ordering for her." The employee says, "No, you can't use the coupons." This went on for quite a while and I could see Ellie and the employee arguing from a few meters away. And that she wasn't technically breaking any rules if she was ordering for two different people from two different phones with two different transactions. Ellie at this point was quite annoyed and what she did next seemed to really anger the lady even more. She wasn't going to give up on the coupon, so she gestured to Anna, telling her to come over. She thrust the phone into Anna's hands and then said, "She's ordering." And then she repeated the order, saying she wants so-and-so. The lady was quite angry at this point, but she reluctantly let her use the coupon and went through with the order. My aunt was laughing a few yards away. She was curious to see the rating and reviews for that McDonald's, and when we checked it out, they had 2 stars. I get rules are rules and your job is on the line when you don't follow those rules, but it's pretty obvious that it was 2 different people ordering here, 2 different phones, 2 different transactions. There should have been no issue. I mean, let's think straight up. If you're the cashier, what would you do in that situation? Would you let the 2 coupons go? Let me know in the comments below. Teacher kicked me out of assembly and inadvertently gave me a year-long recess. This is a story from my high school years. Now, before I write anything, to my American readers, before you start explaining the law to me and calling my story fake, I want to emphasize, this is Africa. We have rules, we have laws, but unless you're murdering someone, they're really more just guidelines to follow than anything else. Heck, what am I saying? I knew a guy that had his friend stabbed to death in a pub. The stabber got set loose with 500 rands. About $28 bail and just never appeared in court again, so murder really isn't that big a deal either. So a brief backstory. They're not really crucial to the plot, but it paints a nice background. Any of those that read the story about my evil stepmother knows that by age 14, I was living alone in my father's house and making a pretty comfortable living renting out his rooms to students. Therefore, needless to say, for me high school was a blast. Now, I'm not going to lie and say I was a good student. I was anything but. I mean, I never drank or smoked, but I skipped school almost more often than I attended. When I rarely did show my face, I'd often just go sit in any class that I felt like, whether I took the subject or not. Sometimes I'd just go to school for recess and go home again after. I was really living the dream of any B-average student. What's more, I hardly ever got in trouble. Even when I got caught, the teachers would just kind of brush it off and let me get away without so much as a slap on the wrist. Most of the teachers either loved me or had long since realized there really was nothing that could be done about me, so they mostly just humored my antics. There was, however, one teacher that saw through my charms. He was the first language teacher, never my favorite or anything, but I truly held no ill will towards him. In fact, I kind of respected him for being the only one that actually bothered calling me out on all my stuff. Although this seldom did him any good because whenever he threatened to call my parents, obnoxious kid that I was, I would just ask him, which parent? My mother in heaven or my father somewhere in Africa? If you manage to reach either of them, could you please ask them to check in once in a while? And this would kinda be the end of the conversation, because as arrogant as I was about it, my argument wasn't untrue. On to the day of the actual story. I was in my senior year and still attending classes on an on and off basis, but attending more than I did past. I wasn't trying to change my ways or anything, but I was in the process of putting together a 4-hour-long video of our high school years, and realized I had skipped so much that year that I hardly had enough footage to use for that segment. On this particular day though, I had picked the wrong day to attend and ended up having to attend assembly. This did not sit well with me, as I had a personal gripe against our school principal for something that had happened in my sister's senior year, and therefore I refused to show him any kind of respect. He later got canned for having an affair with the PE teacher, so karma, but I digress. Now, as arrogant as I was, I do maintain that I wasn't actually talking as loud as the language teacher accused me of, but I will openly admit that I wasn't paying any attention to the principal's speech, because I hadn't done so in 4 years and definitely wouldn't have done so that day. So maybe I was, who knows? He wasn't an unfair teacher or anything. Nonetheless, the language teacher pulled me out of assembly and forced me to go stand outside. So I stand there waiting, several teachers pass me, one asks why I'm not inside. I answer that the language teacher kicked me out, they say, "Oh, okay," and continue about their business. Later, the assembly ends, the students exit, and I'm kinda standing there waiting to be called to the office or just for some kind of consequence, but nada, nothing, zilch. So I walk back to class thinking, that was freaking awesome. Cue the malicious compliance. So the next week rolls around. I decide to attend school that day, assembly time comes, the other students enter, I hang back, and when the doors close, I'm still outside. I hang around again, later a passing teacher again asks why I'm not inside. I once more answer that the language teacher sent me out, and she again walks away without saying another word. The next week, I do the same thing, but this time instead of hanging out where the teacher told me, I just take a leisurely stroll outside, getting fresh air and an extra long recess while the other students are stuck inside that boring assembly. The week after, I got extra ballsy and invited a friend to try it out with me. He agreed, and when the bell rang for assembly, we both just hung back while the other students entered the building. So now I actually had company for this extra long recess. This was like the best discovery ever. Needless to say, I never set foot inside the assembly hall again. I wish I could say the same for my friend, but after 2 weeks, he had grown paranoid and started attending again. Chicken. I would have loved to have ended this story by saying that the language teacher eventually caught me and I could have told him that he was the one that sent me out, but that moment never happened. Even though I was in the wrong and I knew it, I still would have loved that argument. Just a brief epilogue. The language teacher actually ended up marrying one of the girls in my class. Yes, I thought it was weird too, but he wasn't that much older than us. And I was very close to her sister, so him and I had a nice chat at his sister-in-law's wedding, and I apologized to him for being a jerk back then, so we're cool today. I mean, although it wasn't really conducive to the kind of performance you would like to see out of high school, it did sound like they had a pretty good time in high school, and it sounds like they got a few fond memories of it just from kind of funny situations like this. No tall plants? Fine. No edible plants? Fine. My family moved from an apartment without any of our own land to grow plants into a condominium with much more room inside, as well as a little bit of our own space to plant whatever we want. The complex we chose also happens to be the first one you see when you drive into the condominium, though our garden space isn't visible to people driving past the condos on the main road. Our door happens to be accessed by a set of stairs and a landing, which will come into play later. While the staircase bends to the right, on the left side is our garden, right below the first floor window. My parents have also always grown up planting and harvesting different things, and thought this would be a great opportunity to plant whatever we want. My mom and my grandma loved to garden and grow different veggies at their house, and my dad grew up on what I would guess would be called a farm, but minus the farm animals. My paternal grandparents own a lot of land and grew practically anything they could, so we know quite a bit about gardening. So naturally, we wanted to utilize this new gardening space and have some fun. What was particularly nice was that the condo association was a huge advocate for gardening at the time and heavily encouraged residents to plant things in their spaces. Plus, my dad religiously attends each association meeting and is one of the few people there out of the 40+ families living here, so you'd think they'd like us. Wrong. The actual story part. We started off our first year with cucumbers and watermelon that ended disastrously, but that's a whole nother story. My dad is also very fond of sunflowers, so we would plant mammoth sunflowers in our garden space. Naturally, the mammoths were huge and grew tall enough to obscure the first floor window. We planted them for several years without any complaint. Then, the condo association board changed. They suddenly made a rule that we can't plant anything growing past the first floor windows. Oddly specific, right? The next year, instead of planting mammoths, we switched to teddy bear sunflowers. Very short and very cute. Huzzah, no complaint! But it doesn't stop here. As I mentioned earlier, my parents both enjoy growing edible plants. Some of our favorites being cucumbers and tomatoes. Oh yes, large plants. A few years ago, we planted around 6 stalks of cherry tomatoes in our garden space, just short enough to not cover the window. They were very beautiful, lots of red clusters here and there. The cucumbers were sprawled out before them and had lots of those pretty yellow flowers and cucumbers growing off of it. Yeah, well, you guessed it. The association reared its ugly head once more. This time, they couldn't hit us with that "it's too tall" argument, so a new rule was born. No more edible plants are allowed. Sounds like they were getting jealous of our prosperous garden. Well, no biggie. This year, on top of the small amount of plants we usually grow in planters, we're growing cucumbers, radishes, cabbage, carrots, green beans, and some more in several planters. It's not in the garden space, and we bring them inside every night when it gets cold, so we have yet again circumvented their silly rules. Every day they go out on our staircase landing to the point where it's difficult to walk by and just as visible to people walking by. In fact, it looks even messier when they get larger. We'll see how they like it this year. I do feel bad for everyone else who was impacted just because we like to garden and we happen to be the first complex visible. I wish they'd just make a community garden or something. I think that's really quite a shame how hard they're kind of cracking down on these plants. I understand the ones that grow too tall to cover up the window, but edible plants? Why? What's the point? Also, I mean, any plant is technically edible. I'm assuming they mean like fruit-bearing plants, stuff like that, but sometimes they like to be technical. You want your teachers to do the activity even without them knowing how to do it? Okay. So I wasn't the directly complying, but I was part of the compliance. Don't know how I didn't post this before because this story is one of my favorites. I worked for a while in a creativity space that made activities for schools on weekdays and for the family on the weekends. We were trained monitors for the activities and knew where everything was, all the steps for the activity, and we were prepared for 2 months to do that. I need to make it clear that we were professionals when taking care of the kids and applying the activities for them. So, after the training, we were doing the test runs with public schools so we could actually train and become more confident with how things are going to roll when the paying schools started appearing. At that time, we were 5 monitors, 1 coordinator/supervisor, and 1 manager for the space. We all got along greatly and were introduced to the space and its project at the same time. Manager himself was one of the funniest people I have ever had the pleasure of working with. However, one of the schools, upon arriving, already made everyone nervous with how entitled and arrogant their principal, counselor, and teachers were. The kids were lovely, well-behaved, and super creative, but the adults were a pain in the butt. First of all, since our space was located at a shopping mall, the teachers didn't even come up to see the space, stopping at stores and going to buy breakfast for them instead of looking out for the kids since, they came along to watch them. I wasn't caring too much though because I just wanted to do my job and I was doing it. We usually separated the kids in 2 groups and each 20 kids had 2 monitors to help, with one coming back and forth between the groups to see if we needed more materials, if there were too many kids waiting for help, or if one of the monitors needed to be covered to take a kid to the restroom. And on that round, I was making my group with my best friend, so it was a great day so far. But suddenly, the manager came storming in our direction and told us to stop. Just stop. It was like, "Manager, what happened?" Manager says, "Don't worry, just watch from here." As I watched, the teachers began to approach the table and doing our job. I looked at the manager back and he started to grow a grin in his face. I looked again at the teachers and they are lost. Like, kids were asking for help and looking visibly frustrated because the teachers didn't know how to help. They were also so distracted and so far paid so little attention to our process that they didn't know what the kids were doing. In about 15 minutes, we were called back and we went back to doing our jobs, with the rest of the activity finishing up uneventful, more or less. I remember that the kids left very happy and we even got a few hugs from the cutest ones. I have a teacher heart, what can I do? I love kids and helping them learn. Afterwards, I asked for the context for my manager and he said, "Well, that arrogant principal said we were not qualified and that we were overcharging them for the activity, and then said that our teachers could do our job, so the monitors were useless." I just let her prove her theory. In the end, they didn't come back, but I do have a lot of other malicious compliance from that time because, sometimes when dealing with arrogant clients, malicious compliance is the best way of solving problems with them. In rare cases, there are positions that are relatively useless, but in child care and child activities, there's a lot of specialization that can go on, and it's not something that people can just kind of sleepwalk into half the time. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know which story and why in the comment section down below. And thank you all so much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.